Hi everyone and welcome. Today I'm going to do an ongoing series check-in of all the series that I either want to make progress in or even finish in 2023. Now, these are series that I either started this year, some of these I started last year, and even others I started the year before that in 2020. That is especially embarrassing if you know that I started reading again in 2020. So right from the get-go, I was horrible at actually finishing series that I started. However, for 2023, I do have kind of a plan that will help me make progress in these series. If you haven't seen my general plans and goals videos for next year, I do try to use TBR jars. And hopefully that will help me. So I already have a TBR jar for the standalones that I physically own and will be reading next year. And now I am going to put together my ongoing series TBR jar. Now that does mean that in this video, I will only show you series that I can make progress in. So series where the next installment is already published or will be published in 2023. So the ones where I'm waiting on the author, A Song of Ice and Fire, Kingkiller Chronicles, those types of series, I'm not going to mention here. Only the ones that I can possibly make progress and maybe even finish. So I do have, even with that exclusion, I still have 20 to 25 series to talk about. So without further ado, let's just get into the list. But first I want to show two series that I will definitely be making progress in 2023, but they will not be added to the TBR jar because I have a separate schedule for those. The first one is the Age of Madness trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. I still need to read the final book, The Wisdom of Crowds. However, I am buddy reading this together with Jose and Raf. We have live show discussions for these, so I will be discussing with them what's the best time period to finish the final book and to have a live discussion. That will be happening in the first half of the year, like January or February, but it will not be because of the TBR jar, just because we have a buddy read going on. And something similar is true for the entire Kashiel series by Jacqueline Carey. I have read Kashiel's Dart and Kashiel's Chosen, book 1 and 2 of the Phaedra trilogy in 2022. Absolutely adored them, but I am co-hosting a read-along for the entire series, so the 3 trilogies and then the new release, Kashiel's Servant, that is coming out next year, together with a couple of other booktubers with one book every 2 months. So since I have already read the first 2 books, I'm not going to reread them, but this one, the third one, Kashiel's Avatar, I will be reading in the 5th and 6th month of the year because that's the schedule. And of course, I will link everybody down below, all of their channels and the Discords where we are discussing these series. But those are 2 series that I absolutely adore. I will definitely be finishing these next year or continuing them, but not because of the TBR jar, because of a set schedule. Now for the TBR jar, the first one that I have here is Hollow Empire, which is the conclusion of the duology of the Poison War novels by Sam Hawke. This is definitely a little bit of an embarrassment because I read the first one, City of Lies, a couple of years ago. I adored it and then I didn't continue reading. In this one we follow a couple of young people who have become the new counselor, the new poison taster, and a new somebody in politics, but none of them were expecting to be a part of that role so early on. So they're a little bit out of their comfort zone, and then the city is under siege and nobody understands why, and there's probably a traitor in their midst. So yes, a lot of things are happening. Now, in this one we do have not a lot of magic, but towards the end of that original one, you could see that magic was going to happen in the second one, Hollow Empire. You could also see that the story was going to open up besides the city. So everything that the first one ended with makes me think that I will like the second one, so hopefully it will be a pick quite soon. Afterwards, we still have the Rook and Rose trilogy by M.A. Carrick. Now this is the Lyris Knot, this is the second book in that trilogy, and I am probably going to finish this one before the end of the year. However, the sequel, which is going to be the final book in that trilogy, is coming out in 2023. So that one will hit the TBR jar once it is actually published and I can read it. And then we have a conclusion of a duology again. I have quite a bit of series that I could finish quite quickly if I want to, if I put my mind to it. So hopefully that will happen in 2023. But that is For the Throne by Hannah Witten. This is the conclusion of the Wilderwood duology. The first one was For the Wolf, and that one was a Beauty and the Beast retelling of sorts. This one feels like it will be a Sleeping Beauty retelling. But it also feels like a more sequential series, if that makes sense. In the first one, we follow a main character, and in this one, we follow her sister. So because of that, it's not really an issue if there is a long time between reading the first one and the second one. But I really enjoyed that first one, so why not just read that second one? Plus, I really like fairy tale retelling, so even more reason to just pick it up. Then we do have sci-fi. Now, since I only have maybe 2 or 3 sci-fi series on the list, I decided just to include them, because this one is Dune Messiah by Frank Herbert. I have read Dune a little bit over a year ago, absolutely adored it. It's my favorite sci-fi that I've ever read, and I decided that I wanted to continue with the series, especially because the second one is 280 pages. I could very easily read it, and I have heard that the first 4 are like one arc and then you can stop. However, I just never really picked it up. I do think that this is a more recent buy, of the last 6 months, and I do hope that I will be able to pick it up soon, because I think that the sequel of the Dune movies is also coming out in 2023, maybe 2024, I'm not entirely sure. And although that is the second part of the original Dune book, I still want to be in that world when the movie is coming out. I really like to also have a book that can be sort of a companion to the movie. So yes, one that I will hopefully also pick up because of that TBR jar. Next, a very short book, and somehow it just never really came at the top of my priority list, and this is another reason why that jar will be very helpful. Then it will be my priority, and I will not forget that I have it on the shelves, even though I absolutely adore that series, because that is When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain by Niveau. This is a sequel to The Empress of Salt and Fortune. Absolutely adored that novella, and I have seen that the third novella in this series has also come out, so I need to read the second one, especially because this was a very thoughtful gift of a subscriber of mine, because I was talking about this sequel and that I wanted to read it. And then this was gifted to me and I never really read it. So one that I want to give a try as soon as possible. And if this will not be a pick on my TBR jar, I will try to just squeeze it into a TBR, a seasonal TBR, because this should not be a problem, to be honest. Next, one that I will give myself a little bit of leniency as to why I have not made any progress, because this is A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. I think that this was a new release of 2022, to be honest, and I reviewed it in a rapid review of new releases, but its sequel, which is a conclusion of the duology, came out in December of this year, so not even a month ago. I definitely still want to read it. I think that it's called A Fire Endless. I've heard amazing things about that conclusion. I already enjoyed the first one, but since it recently came out, I just really didn't have time to pick it up yet. This one, it had a little bit of a mystery. It was, I think, Irish inspired, even though this takes place in a secondary world. It had that type of vibe, Celtic Irish, and there were children going missing on this island, and you try to discover together with the people on the island what exactly happened. Really, really adored this one. It also had a romance that I quite enjoyed, so yes, just time to pick up the sequel. Next up, the first one in a duology that I absolutely adored, and unfortunately, I did not really like the sequel, so I paused it. And when it becomes a pick on my TBR jar, that will be its final chance, I suppose. This is the first one, The Goddess of Nothing at All by Kat Rector. This was one of my favorite reads in 2021. Absolutely adored this one. This is a Norse myth retelling in which we follow Sigyn, who is the wife of Loki, or one of the wives of Loki. Loved this one, but then I picked up the second one. It was an arc that was gifted to me, and I just really didn't enjoy it. So far, I've only read 50 pages. To be honest, I just wasn't in the right mind space. I was expecting something different than what we actually got, so I decided to just put it down for now. This one can be read as a standalone. So if I really do not like the sequel, I will just read it at that. But because I love the first one that much, I still want to give its sequel, the conclusion of this duology, a fair shot. So unfortunately, sometimes duologies work, sometimes they don't. And I also want to say in that vein that the Celestial Kingdom duology, I don't have it here to show, but the first one is The Daughter of the Moon Goddess. Absolutely adored that one. Then I picked up the second one, and the Sun Warrior, something like that. I did not like it. I have put it on hold. It is still going to be a part of the jar, but if I don't like it the second time around either, it's going to go out of the window, and that will be a DNF. So part of the TBR jar will also be just trying to see and to guess whether or not a series should be DNF'd, because I'm notoriously bad at DNFing series. I'm good at DNFing books if I really cannot continue, but if I'm in between books of a series, it's very difficult for me. So that will be something else that the TBR jar will help me with. Then two series that I could not access because they're at the top of my shelves and the tree is in the way, of course. The first one is Akatar by Sarah J. Maas. I've read the first two, and even though they are not all-time favorite series, I did enjoy those books for what they were, so I definitely want to read the third and final book. Then I also have the Night Runner series by Lynn Llewellyn, in which we follow two spies. We have a master and an apprentice, and over time these two become lovers, which is also a beautiful LGBTQ plus story as well. So I really want to try it, or try to make progress in them, and especially if you are a longer viewer of the channel, you do know that I've read the first three and I absolutely hated the third one. But to be fair, even fans of the series tell me that yes, they did not like the third one either. It was not good. However, the series picks up after that. The fourth book is amazing, so please continue reading. Somehow, this is the same old. It never really was a priority for me, and that's why it never hit the TBR. So hopefully with the priority of the TBR jar pick of the month, if it becomes a pick, I will pick up that fourth book. This is also a very long series. I think it has more than 10 books, probably 15 books in the series. It is divided into trilogies and into smaller parts, so Luckily, at least there's that. But it is a very long series and I own the entire series. So I should just give the fourth one a try and then decide if I want to continue or not. A series that I recently started is the Arthurian Saga by Mary Stuart. This is the first one, The Crystal Cave. This was a coming-of-age story of Merlin. I read this together with Walking with Books, and even though we enjoyed this one, we didn't really absolutely adore it either, but we still want to continue the series. So this is originally, I think, a trilogy, but you also have some companion novels. There are 4 or 5 books in total, and I do think that the second one will be better than the first one, just because this was very close to the original Arthurian legend, and I think that afterwards, because we do have multiple books, it will be more of its own story. So one that I definitely want to continue. I recently picked it up and I want to make it my life goal to, when I start a series, at least make progress in somewhat of a normal time span. So hopefully that will happen for the Arthurian Saga. Then we do have a little bit of an embarrassment here, because this is the Song of the Shattered Sand series by Bradley P. Bolio. This is one of my potential all-time favorite series. It's an epic desert-based fantasy series. We follow Cheda. Cheda is on a revenge quest against these 12 immortal kings who have been given their power by desert gods. We also have a lot of political intrigue. Absolutely adore this series, but I've only read the first 3. I was going to read this one, the 4th book in this 6-book long series, before the end of the year. It has not happened. These are dense books, these are very thick books. It takes a little bit of time to get through these, but I absolutely adore them. So hopefully 2023 will be the year that I finally finish this series. It is 6 books in total, but we also have a couple of novellas and 1 main novella. So at the very least, I want to read those 7, but probably because I love them so much, I will be acquiring the other novellas as well. So yes, one that it is entirely my fault, and I do not know why I am like this, that I have a series that I know I will absolutely adore. I know that when I pick up this 4th book, I will be in love with it, and I will have such a fun time reading it. Why do I not pick it up? Who knows? Who knows at this point? Another sci-fi, Dark Age by Pierce Brown. This is the 2nd one in the 2nd Red Rising trilogy. I adored the original Red Rising trilogy, had some issues with the first one, had some issues with the last one, but overall, a really, really good sci-fi series. And then I did not like Iron Gold, I think, which is the start of that 2nd trilogy. Because in the original trilogy we have 1 POV. In the 2nd trilogy we have multiple POVs, and I did not like how that was handled. So I never really got to Dark Age. However, I have heard time and time again that this is grimdark. This is an amazing story, and Dark Age is the best one of the 5 books that are currently published. And in 2023, the last book of this 2nd trilogy is going to get published. So I, at the very least, want to read Dark Age and then hopefully even that last book, so I'm done with Red Rising. I have heard that the author might be writing more in this universe, maybe a 3rd Red Rising trilogy. I will not jump on the fan bandwagon as soon once that gets announced, but at the very least, the 2nd trilogy I still want to finish. And then we will see. Once the 3rd one is maybe completed, I might try to dive in, but for now, those 2 first trilogies are all that I'm saying yes to. The Dragons of Terra series is one of those series that I've read the first book, absolutely adored it, then I started the 2nd one and somehow I just stopped midway, and that was definitely a me problem, also a little bit of middle book syndrome. Now, the first one is perfect for people who are new to fantasy, but I also really enjoyed it. In that one, you follow somebody who has been punished and has to become a dragon slayer. Now, most people are just maybe a dragon slayer for a month before they get killed. This person has been doing it for years and he's really good at it. But then he receives a message from the king and he says, I will lift up your punishment. You will just be a free man as before, but you need to do one thing, and that is save my daughter who has been abducted. Now, I really enjoyed the humor here. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the characters. Everything was superb. And then the 2nd one, I just really didn't know what direction it was going to, but I have heard since that the 3rd one is just as good. And the 2nd one, it is a little bit middle book syndrome. A lot of people are not really in love with this one, but then the 3rd one, the conclusion of the trilogy, brings it back home. And since not really liking the 2nd one was more of a me problem, I had a lot of books on the priority list. This one was just one that I picked up for fun myself, so it immediately went a little bit lower on the priority list and I just forgot that I was reading it. I still definitely want to give it a thorough and a fair chance, you could say, before I decide that I don't want to continue with the series. And I have a feeling that once I pick up this sequel again, I will actually enjoy it and want to read the 3rd and final book. Next, a series that I'm currently making progress in, and that is The Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. This is the 3rd book, The Veiled Throne. I have a half an hour left in the audiobook, and if you know that this is a 40-hour audiobook or something along those lines, I'm almost done with this 3rd book. This is a 4-book long series. absolutely adore it. A lot of political intrigue. I enjoy Ken Liu's character work so much, and I am going to talk about this third one over on Steve's channel. I think somewhere in January. We have the 8th of January maybe. So by then I will definitely be done with this third one. For the fourth one, I will either try to read it together with Steve, but since these books are more than 1,000 pages long, like I said, the audiobook is pretty big, it might not be able, or I might not be able to finish it in time. If that's the case, it will be part of the TBR jar. If I do finish it in time to have the discussion of the entire Dandelion Dynasty together with Steve and the other hosts, all the better, of course. One series that, again, is one of my potential all-time favorites once I finish it. I also have The Bone Shard Emperor by Andrea Stewart on the list. This is a sequel to The Bone Shard Daughter, which I absolutely adored. This was just a very fun story. I think that that's the best way to explain it. It also had a little bit of a mystery of how the magic here worked and why certain people were at certain places. Really enjoyed it. This is of course a sequel, but I have heard that the third and final book is coming out next year as well. I think already in April. So I hope to pick up this one before then, if it's a pick of the TBR jar, and otherwise we will see. Like I said before, new releases usually do not get read by me very soon. So if I read this one in 2023, I will be happy. But this is another one that I think I will absolutely adore, the entire trilogy. So I do want to more or less prioritize it, up to the point that if it's not a TBR jar pick, it will be just a seasonal TBR pick. Next up, a small novella. This is A Psalm for the Wild Build, which is a monk and robot book by Becky Chambers. This is sci-fi, but it's very cozy sci-fi. It's not hard sci-fi in any sense of the word, because then I would probably not be the biggest fan. But I have heard, well, I know this was one of my anticipated releases, that its sequel has come out in 2022, and I hear some people call it a duology. So I do not know if that will be the last one in the Monk and Robot series. If that's the case, I will be sad, but at the very least, I want to read that sequel very soon. But I do hope that more is coming out. This is just cozy, feel-good sci-fi. If you want to have a little pick-me-up, if you want to have a hug in a book, pick this one up, because it's absolutely amazing. It talks about the world in the future, but usually it feels very bleak, very cold. And there, it's actually extremely cozy, and it's very like, we love the world, and we want to preserve nature and all of that kind of stuff. So just superb. You know you've been talking too much when your SD card is full. However, we are at the final stretch here. And the next one is TBR Veteran. That is The Bitter Twins by Jen Williams, which is the second book in the Winnowing Flame trilogy. The first one, The Nine Train, I read back in 2020, I think, and I really enjoyed it, but since then my tastes have changed quite a bit. And that first one was a mix between fantasy and sci-fi maybe. There was quite a big mystery, and I think that the sci-fi element will be even stronger in this second book. So at the very least, I just want to give it a try, to see if I still enjoy the series and if I want to continue or not. But I am a little bit hesitant, because normally if I would have thought about this now and somebody told me, well, the Winnowing Flame trilogy, it's a mix between fantasy and sci-fi, you're going to love it, I probably wouldn't pick it up. But I know that I loved Nine Train, so I should definitely give The Bitter Twins a try, even if it's just to say that I did not like it in the end. And then we have one that I started in 2022, at the beginning of this year, I think. This is Master Artificer by Justin T. Call, which is the sequel to Master of Sorrows. Now, this is the second book in a quartet, and I do know that the author wants to write multiple quartets, I think maybe 3 or 4, so definitely a very big undertaking, but I enjoyed the first book. However, not as much as I thought I would, because I have heard that this is the origins story of the Dark Lord, you could say. So I thought that it was going to be grimdark, definitely different than more of the traditional fantasy that I normally do not like. But the first one read pretty much like traditional fantasy. I still enjoyed it for what it was, but it reminded me a little bit of Malice by John Gwynne. And although I liked Malice, I did not like that series as a whole. So it went down on my priority list. Also, this is the second book, but the third one is not out yet. So I'm going back and forth if this should be high priority. At the one hand, yes, because then I can say that I am on par with the series, that I'm just waiting for the sequel, and it's not really an ongoing series. So we will see. This is definitely a behemoth of a book as well. It is 850 pages, but if it's pick of the jar, it's pick of the jar. Then it's out of my control, you could say. Next one that I read in October and I really enjoyed, and that is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is dark academia. I think that we follow a main character who is in Yale, at least one of the American universities, and she is part of one of these very elite houses that deal with the supernatural. I really enjoyed this first book, and I definitely want to read its sequel that is coming out early in 2023. So, like I said, new releases, I will not read them straight away, but it will be a part of the TBR jar once the sequel is published. And then if it does not get picked, I think that I will read it around October. But if it gets picked sooner than that, all the better, because I really, really enjoyed this first one. It was kind of a surprise because I never read Dark Academia before. I thought that I was not going to like it. And lo and behold, I did. Because usually fantasy, if it's too modern, I don't like it. This is basically contemporary fantasy, you could say, and I still enjoyed it. And then we have some other, yes, the end of the pile was about the new releases that I was waiting for. This is The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke. That is the first book in the Magic of the Lost series. Yes, I read this at the end of 2021. It made my top 10 of 2021. Absolutely adored this one. This is colonial-inspired fantasy. We have two main characters that I absolutely adore. There's also LGBTQ plus inclusion. And the second one is going to be published in February, I want to say, at least at the beginning of the year. So I will pick it up. This is one of those series that if the sequel finally comes out, I will probably prioritize it over other things. So it shouldn't even be in the TBR jar. But because I also know that sometimes life goes away from me and I forget certain things, it will be in the TBR jars. But I do think that if it does not become a pick, I will read it just out of my own will. And then the final one. This is The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan, the first one in the Empire of the Wolf trilogy, I think it's going to be. This was a new release of 2022. Absolutely adored it. It's grimdark. We have an unusual way of telling the story that I enjoyed. We have the fate that takes a turn for the worse and actually is bad influence in this world, which I absolutely adored. And you have that feeling of bleakness that there is no hope towards the end, which I also like. And I think that the sequel is coming out in January already, or in the beginning of February. So this is another one that I enjoyed so much that I am going to try to read the new release soon after it has come out. I'm not entirely sure, but that is at least my hopes for this series, one that I absolutely adored. So I think that I have gone through all of my ongoing series that I still want to continue in 2023. If you're wondering where Malazan sits, well, I said this before, but Malazan is on pause just because I cannot give it the time that it deserves and the time that it needs, or at least the time that I need to understand everything that happens in Malazan. So if I pick it up, it will either be the second half of 2023 after I finished the Prince of Nothing series by Baker, or 2024. We will see. Or maybe after reading Prince of Nothing by Baker, I decide that I want to have trilogies and shorter books and not a 10-book long series, and I decide to just let go of Malazan. We will see. But for now, that series is on pause. Please let me know if you've read any of these and which ones I should prioritize, even if it's not a TBR jar pick. And also let me know what your ongoing series are that you want to either conclude and finish or make progress in 2023. As always, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you haven't seen my standalone TBR, you can watch that one right here. And see you next time. Bye!